Following fierce backlash over his re-election, Bolivia's embattled President Evo Morales steps down. His announcement coming shortly after the army ramped up the pressure. Results being counted in Spain after the fourth election in as many years, but will it be enough to end the political deadlock? Also coming up, officials put the death toll from Cyclone Bulbul at 20, with 2 million others in storm shelters. This after the cyclone pummeled the coasts of India and Bangladesh. Hello and welcome. You tuned into France 24. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the headlines for you this hour. Firstly, following a fierce backlash over his re-election, Bolivia's embattled President Evo Morales has resigned. His announcement on live TV came a short time after the country's military chief suggested he step down as a way of restoring order in the South American nation. Well, anti-government protesters ramped up pressure on Morales following disputed elections in October, which gave him a fourth term in office. International monitors and opposition leaders alike have called for the vote to be annulled, citing fraud. France 24's Marius Sophis has this report.
Under mounting pressure from the Bolivian people, as well as the army, opposition parties and electoral monitors, Evo Morales announced his resignation as president of Bolivia on Sunday in a televised address. He said he was doing so for the good of the country, yet simultaneously scorned his rivals.
I resign my presidency. Why did I decide to resign? So that Carlos Mesa and Luis Fernando Camacho do not continue to persecute my brothers.
The announcement came just an hour after the commander of the Bolivian Armed Forces urged Morales to step down.
After analyzing the internal conflict situation, we asked the president of the state to renounce his presidential mandate to allow for peace.
It also came as the Organization of American States said that there had been clear manipulation in last month's election. Bolivian Vice President Alvaro Garcia Linera also resigned. Morales claimed to have won re-election last month, which then plunged the country into the biggest crisis of his nearly 14 years in power. The unrest left 3 people dead and over 100 injured in clashes between his supporters and opponents.
To bring us some analysis on the situation in Bolivia, France 24's international affairs editor Armin Georgian joined me here in the studio a short time ago. I asked him about Bolivia's political direction from here on in.
For nearly 14 years, and when he came into office, that was the heyday of leftists like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and Lula da Silva in Brazil. It was an era of people from humble backgrounds rising to the top. So Lula, for example, was a trade unionist. Morales was the first member of Bolivia's indigenous population to become president. So it was a time when people from sort of lower social strata, so to speak, were coming up to the top, and it was a kind of reaction against European-descended elites that had owned key assets. So that was the situation 14 years ago. But now, of course, it's a very different situation in Latin America. There's been a shift to the right or to the center. And what is really left of that kind of old left? Very little now, perhaps just Cuba and Venezuela. Cuba, of course, has reacted and said this is a coup, but I suspect we won't hear many reactions like that in Central or South America in response to what's just happened. So Cuba and Venezuela really where that old kind of populist left is still around. So otherwise there has been this shift to the right or to the center, and probably Morales' challenger from that election in October, Carlos Mesa, who's himself a centrist, will no doubt see an opportunity now.
France 24's Armin Georgian speaking to us there. Well, next, political turmoil is ongoing in neighbouring Chile, where anti-government protesters continue to demand the resignation of President Sebastián Piñera. Now, it comes despite Piñera vowing to amend the country's constitution. Protests were initially triggered by a hike in subway fares, but turned into unprecedented demonstrations and deadly rioting over both social and economic inequalities. France 24's Nick Rushworth has this report.
Protesters marched in an affluent part of the Chilean capital to take their fight to the country's elite. And bikers gathered at the government palace to maintain the pressure on the president.
We have been demonstrating for about 3 weeks now, and he's only worried about the violence and not about the things that people want.
We have to get rid of everything and do it all over again. It's been wrong for 30 years. This system doesn't work.
Chile's president, Sebastián Piñera, now says he will amend the country's Pinochet-era constitution, something demanded by protesters. In an interview with the newspaper El Mercurio, he said the changes would work to better define people's rights and establish how they're going to be respected, and better define the obligations of the state.
Mejorar los salarios.
That move adds to a government reshuffle last week and a series of measures, including a guaranteed minimum wage. But protesters want him to quit amid a major crisis for the country. More than 20 people have been killed and nearly 2,000 protesters injured in clashes with security forces. Anger erupted over a metro ticket price hike and broadened to a call for greater equality.
To Spain for you next, where the vast majority of ballots have been counted after voters headed to the polls for the fourth election in as many years on Sunday. Well, Spaniards last voted in April, with the socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez winning most seats but failing to form a working majority. Well, for the latest picture on how results are tallying up, France 24's Sarah Morris is in Madrid.
The Socialists have emerged on top, as the opinion polls predicted, but they've actually lost 3 seats. They've got 120. The Conservative People's Party has done rather better than it did in April. It did have 66 seats. It's gone up to 87. And perhaps the biggest surprise or the biggest winner of tonight is the far-right party Vox, which has leapfrogged 2 other parties to come in at third place with 52 seats. You'll remember it only attained seats for the first time in April when it had just 24. Podemos, the far left party, loses a few seats, goes down from 41 to 35. And one of the night's big losers are the Liberals, the Citizens Party, formed in Catalonia about a decade ago. They went national. They did have 57 seats, and they've now dropped down right to 10. The problem for Pedro Sánchez will be that he'll be looking at these numbers and realising that the pacts are still very, very difficult. And one of the pacts, for instance, that is now ruled out is with the Citizens Party. That one would have made an absolute majority under the previous parliament. That's no longer possible, and he still can't make those numbers, even with Unidas Podemos, can't make the numbers, would need lots of other smaller parties.
I mean, Sarah, you're actually at the headquarters for the Socialist Party. We understand that Pedro Sánchez arrived not too long ago. What have his supporters there been telling you this evening?
It's a bittersweet victory for them, and many of them are pretty worried because they wanted to gain more seats. They wanted more leverage with the other parties, and the fact that Unidas Podemos, the left-wing ally that Pedro Sánchez did favour, has lost a few seats. That makes it a harder task for them. Many of them saying to me tonight that they feel that the People's Party, the Conservatives, should consider what it's always ruled out, abstaining, not voting against the government to allow a possible government. That kind of German-style coalition has always been ruled out. But back in 2016, the Socialists did it for the then leader of the Conservatives, Mariano Rajoy, and many saying to me tonight they feel time to return the favour, as they put it.
Sarah Morris reporting from Spain for us there. Now, here in the French capital, thousands of people have taken part in an anti-Islamophobia rally. The initiative was organised by several left-wing political organisations. The march itself called for by the left-leaning Daily Libération. Well, last week a man was attacked at a mosque in the town of Bayonne. This amid renewed debate over Muslim women wearing the veil in public establishments. Let's take a listen to some of those who actually attended the rally.
As a French Muslim woman, I want to be free to live my faith. I want my children to feel free in this country and all of us to live together.
As you hear, I'm here to defend secularism and to fight against Islamophobia and all forms of racism, because one cannot divide the fight against racism.
Away from France, at least 20 people have died and more than 2 million others spent the night in storm shelters as Cyclone Bulbul pummeled the coast of both India and Bangladesh. Now, the powerful cyclone winds hit late on Saturday, forcing the closure of ports and airports in both countries. Officials say the number of casualties was reduced due to people being evacuated in time. France 24's Monty Francis has this report.
Packing winds of up to 120 kilometers per hour, Cyclone Bulbul bared down on Bangladesh Saturday. In low-lying areas, storm surges reached 2 meters, bringing devastation.
The water has taken away our shops, houses, roads and embankment. Since yesterday, a lot of our land has gone into the water.
More than 2 million people were evacuated from coastal areas to more than 5,000 shelters inland, where they're riding out the storm. The building of those shelters, along with faster evacuations, have been credited for saving thousands of lives since a cyclone in 2007 killed more than 3,000 people. Scientists say Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable nations to the impacts of climate change. A small country with a population of 164 million, scientists predict a 1-meter rise in sea level will submerge 20% of the country in less than a century, displacing more than 30 million people.
Well, meanwhile, officials have warned of a catastrophic fire danger in Greater Sydney as ferocious bushfires threaten the wider swathes of the state. Well, according to firefighters, some 100 blazes have been still burning across New South Wales and Queensland, including several which are yet to be brought under control. Well, fires have so far killed 3 people and razed more than 150 homes since Friday, when massive fires swept through several towns.
Mate, it's just the worst thing I've ever seen, honestly. The fire front was coming at us, just nothing you could do about it. So, lost a few friends in the fire, lost all the possessions are nothing. It's the people that count,
China's leader Xi Jinping has arrived in Athens for a 3-day state visit. His trip comes not long after Greece's Prime Minister visited Shanghai. Well, the visit's expected to further solidify Greece-China ties on trade, investment and infrastructure. As our Athens correspondent now explains, China is also using Greece as a gateway to the EU's travel-free Schengen zone.
It's here in Sintagma Square, right in the heart of Athens, where this real estate agency decided to open its 4th branch in the capital. Brand new offices with mainly Chinese staff and clients. The reason? Greek law grants European visas to buyers of apartments. They're called golden visas, and 7,000 Chinese have benefited from them in the past 5 years.
Buying property 250,000 or more than that, will you be able to get the Greek permanent residency? But of course, because Greece is a Schengen country and a European country, so it gives you access to also other 26 Schengen countries. And not only just the main applicant to get this permanent residency, but also the main applicant's spouse and both of their parents and their kids.
With the help of his colleague and fellow countrywoman, Stefan inspects one of the 5 buildings that his agency just sold.
It's 100 square meter maisonette. There are 2 bedrooms in this floor and 1 bathroom.
This Chinese maritime giant now owns the entirety of the port of Piraeus, which it plans on renovating, an investment worth nearly €1 billion.
This is where the master plan will be implemented with an area of hotels.
Critics caution over the increasing presence of Chinese investors in the country, but analysts point to the bigger picture.
During the crisis, Greece was forced to privatize assets by its public creditors, the International Monetary Fund and the European Union. In exchange for loans, they called on Greece to sell its public assets, and when the port had to be sold, Costco was the only bidder.
The Chinese don't intend on stopping here. After transportation and telecommunications, they are also delving into renewable energy. Even the Bank of China will soon open its first branch in Athens.
France 24 reporter from Athens there. You are very much up to date. More international headlines in 15 minutes' time on France 24. Join us then.
France 24. Every art form.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.